Hello and welcome. My name is Kurt Durham. I represent Faison Associates Security Committee. Today we're going to be talking about mall security, but please keep in mind that this is not mall security only, but anyone who is involved in providing common area services for retail spaces. We have a number of objectives that are absolutely essential to properly perform professional mall security. We are primarily responsible for the safety, comfort, and convenience of our shopping public. Please remember that if it were not for the shopping public, we wouldn't have jobs. In order for a security officer to perform his functions, he must be knowledgeable. Knowledge is an absolute essential. He has to be aware of the laws. He has to be aware of the requirements of his particular organization. He has to be aware of standards that set the goals for professionalism in the industry. He also has to be aware of requirements, the requirements that are necessary in order to make mall security and retail security absolutely successful in having our customers go away with an impression that they have been well served by security.
Hey, how you doing today? Great.
There are certain objectives that a security officer needs to keep in mind in performing his tasks. The first and foremost objective is to be absolutely impartial. He must, without regard for sex, race, or national origin, treat every individual absolutely the same. That is for persons inside the organization as well as for patrons and merchants. Everyone encountered in a professional capacity by a security officer must be treated with absolute impartiality.
How you doing today?
How are you?
Okay.
The second objective that a security officer needs to keep in mind is respect. Simple human respect for one person, from one person to another. Respect is the cornerstone of a security officer's operational procedures. He must be respectful of the other persons who are within the security organization. He must be absolutely respectful of everyone he encounters. Never should a security officer's performance be marred by an attitude that demonstrates, either in gesture or in word, that he is disrespectful of any person. When a security officer is assigned to patrol a particular area, he must do so diligently. Security officers need to be aware of their surroundings. They have to be aware of their environment. They need to do everything that is necessary to not only be seen by the public, which is an essential ingredient of patrol operations, but also to have the public see them. Patrol area assignments are usually made so that the manpower of the mall the manpower of the property can be distributed in its most efficient way. If security officers are not diligent, then a part of that sector doesn't get covered. With regard to the appearance of security officers, it is frequently said, in fact, the biggest cliche used probably in property management is that security is the most visible part of the management operation. Without a doubt, that's true. It's possible for patrons to come to a shopping mall and never see a member of the management staff, but they certainly will see security. And the way that security presents itself is demonstrated first and foremost by how do they appear. Are the security officers neatly pressed? Are they neatly groomed? Do they carry themselves in an alert manner? Those are things that provide the impression that the customer and others are probably going to take away about the property. Security officers should be very diligent in how they appear. Another thing that is essential, another objective that is absolutely essential for security officers is to assist their fellow employees. Now let's talk about how that may be. For example, a security officer finds it necessary to approach an individual for the purpose of asking him to comply with a mall rule or regulation needs to know that if there is a problem, he can count on the assistance of his fellow employees, his fellow security officers. Other security officers need to know that in turn they will be assisted if it's required. It is not only a matter of the officer feeling good, it can actually be a great safety factor, and it certainly adds to the confidence level and the team spirit of the entire organization if each member feels that the other members will assist them when it's required. Another objective of the security officer is obedience to his instructions, obedience to procedure. Security officers do not operate in a vacuum. Security officers usually don't make the rules. They comply with the rules. They enforce the rules. In order to have good compliance, you have to have obedience. The security officer himself needs to obey the reasonable and lawful directives of his superiors. If a team is to function, it must have leadership. And in order for the team to function effectively, the leadership needs to be able to rely on each of its members to properly perform their assigned task, which means that they have to be obedient. In specific situations, it's very possible that there won't be time to discuss the reasons for directives that are given. That's especially true in emergency type situations. It's absolutely essential that in emergency situations and in routine matters that the leadership of the security organization and of property management can feel confident that their security officers and the discharge of their professional responsibilities will be obedient to procedures and directives. As far as equipment goes, the security radio is probably the most essential piece of equipment that a security officer has. With it, he's able to transact the business of security, and he's also able to call for assistance when it's required. The security radio can only be used if the security officer understands its purpose. It is absolutely essential that security officers be aware of its uses, but also aware of its limitations. The security officer needs to communicate in all matters, whether they are in a routine situation or a more critical situation, absolutely clearly. If it is all possible, he needs to have pre-planned what he can say. It is also a frightening thought to think that if you need your radio, it doesn't work. And the reason it doesn't work is because you haven't charged the battery, or that a radio that malfunctioned on the previous shift hasn't been repaired because nobody reported it. Please keep in mind that security operations depend on this device. This device is designed to facilitate communication between security officers. It also allows them to summon emergency assistance if required, police and fire. Without this device, a security officer would be essentially alone. We talked about previously the need of security officers to be cooperative in their efforts. This radio allows security officers to do that from one place to another. Some security organizations have the luxury of a security dispatcher. The purpose of the dispatcher is to relay information to facilitate a communication between security officers, between persons outside the organization, such as persons calling for assistance, and the security officer, and in short, to facilitate the communication that is essential in order to do the function. Security dispatchers have an obligation to be alert to communication. The security officer needs to treat dispatchers with the respect that they would show other persons. If a dispatch facility or organization or apparatus is not available for the security officer, then security officers must facilitate their own communication with the outside world. For example, if a security officer were to observe a situation which requires the response of emergency assistance, then he must radio someone, particularly if he's unable to himself leave to do that. Some organizations have equipped their security officers, or at least one of the duty security officers, with a cellular telephone. If the cellular telephone is to be used to call communication, it must be kept in mind that the most complete available information must be relayed to the emergency responding persons. In the case of criminal activity, the police are going to want to know how many people are involved, who, if possible, is performing the act, and what they look like. They're also going to want to know whether or not there are any weapons involved. They're going to want other information such as the exact location of the perpetrators so that their emergency response can be facilitated with the utmost of safety. An example of that would be if a security officer had knowledge that a crime were occurring on the interior of a business space, for example. The responding police officers might want to delay their response and respond only after the perpetrator were clear of the interior of the business space. That's so that hostage situations don't develop. If the security officer or the security dispatcher relaying that information is not specific, even though that information is available to them, a great amount of harm can be done. In summary, the security radio is perhaps the most essential piece of equipment available to security officers. But in order for it to operate, it must be used correctly. The security officer needs to keep in mind that the ultimate responsibility for his safety as facilitated by radios is his own responsibility. It is absolutely essential that the security officer keep his radio equipment functioning properly, that he understand its use, that he communicate in prescribed and clear-cut ways so that he is understood. He must think through what he says, if possible and time allows, prior to saying it. The best communication, quite obviously, is the clearest communication. That requires persistence and practice. It should also be kept in mind that radio communication on a day-to-day basis of the non-emergency type needs to be professional in its character. If it's not professional, when the emergency comes, that will tend to be not professional also. Non-professionalism, imprecise and unclear communication in a time of emergency can be critical.
Hey, Roger, wait a minute. Your report that you turned in last night?
Yes, sir.
I know you think I'm a yell at you or anything, but actually they really complimented you. Said all the facts were in there, all the opinions were out, and that's what we wanted before. So I just want to compliment you. It was a really, really good report.
I appreciate that, sir. Thank you.
No problem.
One of the elements of the security officer's job that is perhaps as disliked as any other is the writing of reports. But it's absolutely essential that report writing occur and that it occur accurately. The writing of reports is provides an ability for persons to see the action at some point in the future. There are all kinds of reasons to write reports. Reports are written to ensure that information is conveyed to property management, to investigative agencies, that it provides a document prepared at the same time or relatively at the same time as the incident when it occurs, which allows for the most accurate probability that the information in the report is correct. Reports need to be done, quite obviously, as soon to the occurrence as possible. Report writing is an absolutely essential skill and one of the most important duties of the security officer. It is apparent that if people are going to look at security reports at some point in the future and understand the action that occurred or the incident being reported by the security officer, the report must be clearly, legibly, and accurately written. The report needs to contain all relevant information related to the subject being reported, to the incident being reported, to the persons involved in the reporting. However, it is equally essential that security officers keep opinions out of reports. If there is information that comes to the attention of a security officer that would lead him to believe that a person is inaccurately reporting, he needs to report that information. But he needs to keep clear of such statements as, it is the opinion of this writer or the opinion of this security officer that someone is lying, or other information that may or may not be accurate based solely on the hunch of the security officer. Security organizations ordinarily provide forms that are to be used in filling out reports. Sometimes these forms have specific functions. For example, there might be an accident report, which would be used for motor vehicle accidents. At other times, there are forms that are used to report injuries. And at still other times, there are generalized criminal or incident type forms. It is necessary that security officers are very conscientious in ensuring that only these official forms are used. If information is reported in unofficial ways, then quite probably the information is lost, or at least it doesn't follow the format of the intended use or the intended method of preparation. Also, a form of this type is absolutely useful for the security officer in ensuring that he has answered all the questions which are on the form. If he's done that and the form is well prepared, then probably he has a fairly complete report. The foundation for any good reporting system are the notes that a security officer takes in connection with his duties. Usually these notes are kept in a notebook that is small enough to be carried on the person of the security officer, usually in the back pocket. It probably should have loose leaves so that unessential information can be taken out at some future point if he has to present the information, as in court, for example. And it also needs to chronicle a couple of types of information. The number one is the type of information that is used to make notes for later preparation of the written report. The other is, for example, if an officer is given a lookout or he's given administrative information, such as doors need to be unlocked at a certain time. The officer has this information in his own personal notebook and he can refer to it when it is convenient for him. Sometimes it is even protective for the officer because he can go back and say, no boss, you said 10 o'clock, I have it in my notes and I'm absolutely confident that that's what was said. These notes should also be dated and should be, if possible, the hour of the day given. This allows for an accurate reconstruction of a chronology of a series of events if that later became necessary. Additionally, security notes should not have personal information. Personal information such as pick up a loaf of bread after work. The reason for that is pretty obvious. Notes of this type can be used in court, and if they're used in court, they can be seen by the other side's attorneys. That means that any information in that notebook is available for scrutiny by the other side. Some of it could be pretty embarrassing. It can even be detrimental to the point that the officer is trying to make or that his company is trying to make. Personal information has a place, but it's not in a security officer's notebook. Notebooks also are usually considered in any administrative proceeding that has the admission of evidence as part of its operation, or in a court. This information in the notebook is usually considered to be the best information because it was prepared at or near the time that the incident occurred, and it provides for the best recollection of the officer. The officer should accordingly be very careful in seeing that only accurate representations of information goes into his notebook. Speculation about what may have occurred might need to go in his diary, or you might want to put it in your diary, but it certainly shouldn't be in your official notes that you keep as part of your job. Written notes are the foundation for what flows later in both court testimony and in written reports and in the ability of the officer to reconstruct an event as it actually occurred. The importance of taking good, accurate notes can't be overemphasized. One final point needs to be made about report writing and reports and officers' notes. And that is that officers' notes, reports, and any other material related to an event that occurs in a security type operation should never be revealed to anyone outside the organization except as authorized by property management or as required by law. As we mentioned previously, it might very well be necessary that an officer has to produce his notes in court. A written report might be used in evidence at a trial. But other than being required to disclose, never should an officer voluntarily provide to any person except as authorized any information related to an incident. It is absolutely necessary that security officers maintain confidentiality and remain faithful to their organization and to preclude any unauthorized disclosure of information. From comments I hear from security officers, frequently there's a feeling that property managers overemphasize the public relations aspect of security officers' functions. From the comments I hear from property managers, sometimes they feel that security officers de-emphasize the public relations aspect of their job. I'd like to offer a thought. Public relations is the entire reason that security officers are in existence. The safety, comfort, and convenience of the shopping public is the reason that we all have jobs. If customers are not satisfied with what we do as employees of a property, then they don't come back. It has been said, and it's even a cliche almost, that the most visible part of a staff of any commercial property is the security staff. It's absolutely true. We're immediately and instantly visible by the way we're dressed. It's also when there is a problem of almost any kind, security is thought of as the answer to that problem. The best security approach to public relations is doing their job consistently on a day-to-day basis in a way that reflects favorably on the establishment. It can be as simple as providing directions when it's required. It can be as complicated as rendering aid to an injured person. It can be as helpful as finding a lost car that was thought to be stolen. It can be as involved as in investigating some injury that has been reported to property. But public relations is the reason that we're in business. Public relations is the name of the game for the security officer. Please keep in mind that were it not for the public who comes to spend money at commercial facilities, we wouldn't be employed. Public relations is not confined to the aspect of a good show, as is sometimes thought. Public relations is what we do for a living. Let's review what we've talked about so far. First, security officers need to keep in mind the objectives of what they're trying to accomplish. And in doing that, there are some priorities that should be clearly established both in the procedure written for security officers and in their own minds about what they're trying to accomplish. The first and most important aspect of a security officer's job is the need to protect persons. Next comes the need to protect property. It's the property of the property management company that he works for, as well as other persons' property. Thirdly, and finally, is the enforcement of mall rules and regulations. Those objectives, those criteria, those priorities are absolutely essential to keep in mind. In a complicated, involved situation, if you keep those three principles in mind, it makes sorting out what to do first and what gets preference a lot easier. Next, we talked about report writing. Reports need to be written in a contemporaneous and accurate way that clearly reflect the incident being reported. They need to be free of opinion. Then we talked about communication. Communication, primarily by radio, is absolutely essential to the safety and proper function of the security organization. Security officers should practice professionalism in the daily conduct of their affairs. Daily use of the radio in a professional, precise, pre-planned way will aid when the chips are down. Please keep in mind that the principles we've talked about today are applicable whether you work in a large regional shopping mall or whether you work in a small strip center. The principles are absolutely the same. Keep in mind also that in order to do our work to present customer service as security officers, certain guidelines and principles must be adhered to. One is respect for persons. Every individual must be treated with respect. And please understand that your fellow employees are more respectful of the general public if they in turn are treated themselves with respect. Internal and external respect for all persons is an essential.
Here, guy, they're on they're level 2 by the registration desk, right across from the registration desk.
Security officers wear uniforms. No matter how professional they may be, how knowledgeable they may be, or how good they are at doing their jobs, if they don't look professional, then nobody will believe that they're that good. It is absolutely required that security officers, in order to adequately represent the property that they serve, be professionally attired, that they be groomed appropriately, and that a professional image be absolutely maintained, and that nothing detracts from that, either in the manner that they're dressed or in their words, disrespectful conversation, loud, boisterous behavior, or anything else that would detract from a professional image absolutely is a disservice to themselves and to their properties. Please also keep in mind that teamwork requires that we be obedient to the procedures as they're written and to the lawful instructions of our superiors. Unless we obey, we can't compel compliance from other people. Absolutely essential. That's part one of our special series on mall security. Please keep in mind that a professional security officer is a major asset to a property. See you next time.